Well, hello again. A few weeks ago, Robin and I headed off to the Lake District to an area around Holmfell and Tarn House, and I decided to take with me the Bronica outfit. Fairly heavy outfit, so I slimmed it down a bit. Didn't take the extender and the prism finder, and also left out as much equipment as possible, smaller tripod. But I also took a 35mm autofocus camera with me, a 28-200 lens attached. Used HP5 Plus predominantly as my main film of the day in both cameras, but I also took some Delta 100 in the Bronica to try and get some additional contrast into some of the shots, give me an option when I came back and decide which one I wanted to print or manipulate later in Lightroom or in the darkroom. So without further ado, let's have a look at the trip. Now we set off from the car park near the bottom of the Yew Tree Tarn, and yes, we ended up to a little area just below Tarn House where there's a small waterfall. Now waterfalls aren't my thing, I don't like waterfall photography particularly. I see some good ones but not many, but I did decide to shoot it because there wasn't too much water in there. I set myself up with my wide angle lens for a change. We don't usually use this very often, but it was right I think for this shot. I was quite close. Yellow filter in place as usual, just focused on the waterfall itself and stopped the lens down to I think it's about f16. Took a couple of frames. Yeah, it's okay. Keep the sun out the image. Don't want the sun getting in there, it's going to ruin it. I mean, it is what it is. It's a waterfall. It's not a very good shot of a waterfall either, so yeah, let's move on from that. Now that's my bag, lightweight tripod, camera insert stuffed in there, easier to carry that way, far better on your back. Took a couple of frames as well with the 35mm with the zoom lens, tripod mounted obviously because it was very slow, the shutter speeds. So yes, I had to do that. It's slightly better composition I think. I actually prefer that one to the first image from the Bronica. I think the format suits it better. So plod on up the hill. Yeah, gear was fairly hefty but not too bad. Not too bad, I must admit, quite light. Had food and drink with me though as well, so you've got to take that into account. Water being probably the heaviest thing we typically carry as landscape photographers. Anyway, round about the top at Tarn House, we just wandered around in the area. Now it was one of those days where it's blue skies and fluffy white clouds, which I absolutely hate because they're cliched. I mean, yeah, they come out okay. You can boost them up with a red filter and a polarizer, but it's not really my sort of weather, I'll be honest. But I did get a couple of shots. I zoomed in on this tree here. It's okay. I mean, it's nothing special. It's a tree, you know. Handy I had the 35mm camera with me, but it's more sort of a record shot than anything else. It's not going to win any awards. Yeah, carried on back down to Yew Tree Tarn, which had dried out for some reason or leaked. Very sad. Very shallow tarn, that one, by the way, as well. On to the main part of the day. We spent 8 hours up on Holmfell from about 12:30 till about 8:30 at night. Took a lot of food and drink with us. Beautiful up there. Now I was shooting HP5 Plus here, and I did mess around with various filters. I had red on there, I had yellow, I had the polarizer, and I didn't make a note of any of them, foolishly. So I couldn't tell you which is which, to be honest. I tended to print the ones which were done with the yellow, and sometimes the orange, because they had less contrast. And yeah, it was very pleasant, very easy shooting. The weather was beautiful. It was a little bit chilly, but we dressed up. Very similar shot to one I took last year in colour. Quite a nice composition, quite nice skies, not exceptional though. So I reshot it with Delta 100, just to give myself a bit of an option really, see if the contrast boost was worthwhile, see if there's any real differences, which surprisingly there's not. There's not as much difference as you'd think between the two films, certainly in grain, not at this size anyway, not with a 6x6 camera. So just working happily up on the mountain using the 35mm here, which, you know, gives great results. HP5 Plus again, rated at 200 by the way. I was actually pulling these films because of the bright skies, so I didn't have the skies blocking up. Made it a lot easier to print later. It's very nice weather, as I say, nice weather to be out. The clouds were building now, thankfully. The clouds were coming up somewhat, and I could see this rain cloud coming in behind this tree, so I had time to set up my camera with a 150mm, my longest lens. Yellow filter. I was lucky the rain didn't come across me. It hit the distant hillside, only about quarter of a mile away. And it was wonderful because that tree was sort of sat there on the top. Would have been nice to have a longer lens. I did take some of the 35mm, but they're a bit soft to be honest because I was hand holding. But yeah, nice lighting. Nice lighting, taken both with HP5 Plus and Delta 100. So I got a choice of shots there. I'd say the HP5 Plus is probably easier to print. Again, I was pulling that film, so there was lower contrast. Delta 100 I ran at its standard speed. This is one of the 35mm ones. I did try printing it, but it is a little bit soft because I was using a cheap yellow filter, a plastic cheap yellow filter, and that was affecting the sharpness at the longer end. So not great, to be honest. I should have put a better filter on, which I've now got. So we meandered around on the fell for quite some time. We would move between spots every hour or so, and we did get caught in this one shower. I mean, I can't complain really after the whole day out. Being caught in a shower for 15 minutes is nothing to complain about in Britain. I mean that counts as practically tropical weather, you know, where we are up north in England. But yeah, it makes for great skies, as you can see. Another 35mm shot. The grain, I think, enhances this sort of image. That's not a fantastic one, but again, it's picking out those silver birch. Good skies though, really good dramatic skies. Another with the Bronica. Yeah, great to have that cloud up there. It's almost like you've graduated it. And again, you can see the storm clouds and the rain lashing down just to the right of where I was standing here. Fantastic with those trees, those silver birch perched on top of the rocky outcrops. Really, really lovely to see that up there. So again, moving the gear around was relatively straightforward. It's not as ideal as a camera bag, having it in an insert, and I'll cover that in a future video, again in the lakes, where I show you a bit more about the insert and how I carry the Bronica. But one of the beauties of this spot is that you can set up and view 360. You can move around very easily and get different views. So if the light improves one area, then you can shoot it. If it suddenly looks great over your shoulder, there's also compositions that way as well. Now, I decided I was going to set up and do a proper shot here of Coniston in the distance, because I've got some lovely trees in the foreground, some lovely fells. I had to wait about half an hour for the light though, because there was nothing on the foreground, and as you can see there, it was a bit dull. So I was sat here with the long lens on again, the 150, and a yellow filter, metering away, but the light wasn't on the foreground, and I needed that foreground light. I really wanted it, so it did come out eventually, as you can see here. And it balanced the scene out a lot better. I wouldn't say it's not a portfolio shot, it's a very pleasant shot. And again, with the 35mm, choice of formats, aspect ratios, yeah, they've all got their advantages and disadvantages. So it was one of those where we were hoping we were going to get some really dramatic cloud coming in later in the day without it snuffing out the sun, which is always a tricky one, because you know, you want the best of both worlds. So here's the insert in the camera bag. It fits neatly into my Osprey Talon bag, and it can hold my entire Bronica kit if I want it to, which would weigh about 6 kilos, which is quite heavy. I only took about 4 kilos of Bronica outfit up there, so it was just about manageable with all the food and drink. And this is probably going to come in if it's my favourite shot. Now I could see this shot immediately in the viewfinder as soon as I set the camera up, and I waited and waited and waited for the light to improve. I wasn't going to waste frames unnecessarily. I sort of hung around, chatted to Robin, and eventually the light came out. The skies looked good, and I got a great shot. I'm really pleased with that one. Just being able to get the tree below the line of the mountain, and the same in the 35mm shot. Just getting that tree below the skyline, the mountain ridgeline, is really important. Now, the advantage of the 35mm here is being able to rack the thing right out when you are shooting long distances at 200mm. I couldn't have done what I did without the 35mm camera, so it was very useful to have both outfits with me. Again, a long shot, just getting that tree heads just below the mountain line, but it was soft. It was soft again, sadly. My mistake, cheap filter. It did affect it at the longer ends. Without the filter, it's pin sharp, very good lens. Carried on shooting. No problems with the Bronica. I've got I've got the Cokin square filters with me on the Bronica, which are pretty good. I may start using glass filters, to be honest, screw in glass filters though, just to optimise the quality as much as possible. And the sun was sort of, by now, it was dipping behind the mountains. The gear, you know, at this stage was getting packed away. I was starting to think, am I going to get any good light? And lo and behold, look what happens. I get some amazing light in the foreground and some on the Langdales in the background. So I'd set up again, and I was shooting both with the Bronica and the 35mm and managed to capture some of that light. I'm really pleased with that. I love the sky, love the mountains. Although the colour is dropping away rapidly, it's not a problem when you're shooting black and white. And you're just getting those shafts of light hitting the mountains in the distance. Fantastic, just draws your eye right through the frame. Really like those two, really do like those two frames. Rob was shooting colour, so he was hoping for a dramatic sunset. Not so much of a problem for me because dramatic greys aren't really the same, to be honest. The 35mm, it was great. It was great to have both. It can be a distraction shooting 35mm and medium format, and I don't typically do it, but having been to this location before, I knew it would be advantageous to have both. So you can see that it was colouring up the sky there, but the location we were at didn't have great views as soon as the sun dipped. So yes, that was the end of the day as far as my shooting was concerned. We would have been better off heading to higher ground to get some better views, to possibly find somewhere where we could get the sun illuminating maybe a lake, because that would give us some magnificent last opportunities to shoot. But overall, I was very pleased. I'm very pleased indeed with the choice of equipment. First off, the two cameras. Now, the Bronica works fantastically. I was very pleased though to have the 35mm with me for the long end of the zoom range, which picked out a few shots. Had I used it without the filter, I think it would have been better. Some of those may have got printed. In terms of the film choice, the HP5 Plus in both the 35mm and in the Bronica was rated at 200, and it was therefore cut back in development. And I also very generously expose when I meter for the shadows. I probably was metering for zone 4 on the day. So I was able to drop a third off the development time. Now that tamed the highlights in the skies, makes it easier to print, a bit less contrasty. I did have a roll of Delta 100, actually I had 2 rolls of Delta 100 in the Bronica as well. And that came out more contrasty. I've got more dense highlights, nice and sharp though, and not massively different. Now the grain pattern, I might pop one up here. I'm not really into sort of these comparisons, I'll be honest. The grain pattern isn't that different when you talk about prints, when you talk about real life, real world situations. Yes, Delta 100 is sharper, it's got finer grain. But in a 6x6, you know, it's not a massive thing. It's not huge unless you're going for poster size enlargements. 35mm, different kettle of fish altogether. With 35mm, you would notice the difference. It's quite considerable. So yeah, slower films in 35mm are generally a good idea for landscapes. Anyway, I've rabbited on enough. I will be going on another trip, I've recorded obviously, to the Northern Lake District in a few weeks. I'll show you that one. And that has the Bronica again going out, and the 35mm, but they're used independently of each other. I use the Bronica for one part of the day, and the 35mm for another part. So yeah, I hope you'll find that one interesting too. Hope you enjoyed the images and the trip video, and I will see you again soon. Thanks for watching.